Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and joined again by Jeff Berkowitz in Chicago with Public Affairs Television. And Jeff, we're going to be talking about kind of a host of things this week. One of the things that has been going on for some years is people fleeing Chicago, fleeing Illinois for a variety of reasons. One of them is crime, which you and I have talked about extensively, but the other is the cost of living here, the cost of property taxes, and the feeling that we have a state government that just really doesn't give two hoots about the taxpayers and the costs that they have to bear, because they keep adding, the state government does, they keep adding cost that must be borne by taxpayers and residents of Illinois around the state. I'm sure you have incurred that in the Chicagoland area. Frankly, it's something that I think every corner of the state, people are feeling it.
The government, Terry, is not working in Illinois. It's a dysfunctional government. We don't have people in Springfield who are representing people across the state. In Chicago, they're not representing people in the city. In Cook County, they're not representing the folks across the county. And I imagine downstate, Terry, you would know more. Similar things is working in Illinois. That's the short of it.
You know, Jeff, one of the stories that came out from the Republicans, and people probably know who watch us, that the Republicans in the Illinois legislature, in both cases, they hardly have enough people in the legislature to hold a caucus meeting. But one of the things the Republicans can do is at least have a press conference and bring an issue to the attention of the press, and hopefully it filters out. With that, Representative Noreen Hammond spoke about, with some of her other House Republican colleagues, about an issue that I think most people have not been made aware of, and that is that the Democrats have allowed for health care payments, Medicaid payments, for illegal aliens that are now in Illinois, for them to be compensated, and the taxpayers now are going to have to pay for that. Let's listen to what Representative Hammond had to say about how much costs are being incurred.
The estimate for expanded health benefits for undocumented immigrant adults will total nearly $222 million in FY23 and nearly $990 million in FY24, which represents a $768 million increase, equaling 346% year over year. Undocumented immigrants are ineligible for any federal match.
Under normal circumstances, Medicaid, the federal government will compensate the state for 50% of the cost. But because these are illegal aliens, the federal government will not compensate. That means that taxpayers of Illinois are going to incur over, just in this year and the new fiscal year, which starts July 1, are going to incur a combination of about $1.3 billion. And as the House Republicans noted in their press conference, there are many other social welfare programs the state already has for Illinois residents that are underfunded, that where they are desperate for funds. But here we are being very gracious and spending $1.3 billion out of our general revenue fund that can't go to fund some of the programs that would help Illinois residents.
Well, this is a dysfunctional Democratic Party nationally, in the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago. And so the chickens are coming home to roost. I guess we'll hear some explanation from the Democratic Party as to why they so sorely underestimated these costs. This was a program that started out initially, it was going to be $2 million, I guess, something like that, Terry. $2 million, I think, maybe less, to assist illegal, what is the proper word now is undocumented individuals who've come into this country, a large part across our southern border, and then the government has flown these people, our federal government has flown these people around into the various cities. This is a crazy program that's going on. It's not small. It involves 2 to 3 million illegal immigrants walking across our borders, essentially, and then being pushed into the hinterland. And now in a microcosm, we have Illinois trying to deal with this and underestimating the cost, is initially saying something like 2 million, and then it turns out, no, fiscal year, it's not going to be 2 million, it's going to be 200 million in 2024. And then that's 2.5 years into the program. And now we're there, and it's not 2 million, it's not 200 million, it's $1 billion. Why? Because nobody has a handle nationally as to how many illegals are coming into this country, whether it's J.B. Pritzker, who's running for president. So gosh knows, he should know. He's now a national figure.
Oops. You know, I mean, look, when people in government say we estimate something is going to cost, they have no idea. And this is another example where they didn't cap it. They didn't say we're going to put so much money into a fund. This is the difference, and people ought to understand this, between normal budgeting that homeowners do, and they say, honey, we're going to spend $100 on Billy's birthday party. Okay, you're going to spend $100. But when you have an entitlement program, when you say we're going to start a program that's going to cover costs for a group of people, whether it's Social Security or health care for the indigent, you don't know how much it's going to cost. And when you combine this with the Biden policy, an open door policy where you got people, record numbers coming over, if it's going to be now $220 million, jumping to $990 million in fiscal year 24, which starts July 1, what's it going to be in fiscal year 25? How are you going to cap this? You're not going to cap it unless you change the law, undo this. And as the Republicans said, and this is also significant, this program was introduced in a non-democratic way, small d. They didn't have one committee hearing on this that could be reported on and brought out and covered by the press so that the people could hear it. They're slipping it into the budget implementation plan. I have a little trouble on that today. But, it is a non-democratic process. And here, as we see, this isn't sending some little thing to some city somewhere. This is over $1 billion that's going to come out. And that means to pay for this, you're going to be underfunding any number of other programs that should have been funded.
We might note who started this in Illinois. We'll come up to Chicago, where so many of the problems arise or originate, and we go to Representative Delia Ramirez. Then she was a state rep. Now she's a congresswoman, because we reward incompetence. We don't have a meritocracy. We reward incompetence. So she was the one who estimated $2 million for the first year. Now, and then that ballooned to 200 million, and now we're going to 1 billion. And what did we do? She now became the congresswoman from the 3rd Congressional District, almost a district designed for her, or somebody at least who would be Hispanic, okay? Because we don't do things based on, as Martin Luther King, judging people by the content of their character. That's the world, that was the dream he aspired to. No. We judge them by their gender. We judge them by their race. We judge them by the color of their skin. The country is going in the wrong direction. Always hear that. Right direction, wrong direction. Right track, wrong track. And this is just a sort of the microcosm of that example. And we're going backwards. I mean, the big picture here is the country decides to elect a person named Joe Biden. And so we've had a long-term problem with the southern border. Biden says, after President Trump has largely fixed the problem by having a apply from your country for your asylum and so forth. No. Biden junks that program, which had cut off much of the flow.
Yeah, the Wait in Mexico program. He did that on day one. Day one, Biden pulled the plug on the Wait in Mexico program and did a series of other things. And what you have is now some 4 or 5 million people that have come in just the last 2 years. And folks, when you hear about the when you hear about the border crisis, which if you're watching the three networks, you probably rarely hear about it because they pretty much try to ignore it. But here in Illinois, it impacts you directly. $1.3 billion in just 2 fiscal years right there. And God knows what it's doing as far as the cost of crime.
But bringing this home, Illinois is a sanctuary state.
Yeah.
Chicago is a sanctuary city. We didn't vote for that, Terry. There was no legislation. That sort of was a of the Democratic to help make Illinois a welcoming state, Chicago a welcoming city. So when we're now welcoming 5 million illegal immigrants, undocumented workers, however you want, undocumented individuals, as many of them are now working, we're now welcoming 5 million people. Well, Illinois now is welcoming many more to this program to give what? To give free health care to illegal immigrants in Illinois. That's what this program is, free health care. We put the word Medicaid to it, but essentially we could just say, come to Illinois, build it and they will come. We have built it, they're coming. And what happens? Well, if you get many more illegal immigrants coming into the country, undocumented individuals, you're going to have more coming into Illinois. So your numbers are off there. But Terry, what else do we do? Well, we start this program and it's kind of like Medicare for illegals, people over 65. Well, then we drop the age. It's over 55. Then we drop the age over 41. Now it's going to be over 19. I guess the kids are somehow covered by another program that is from 1 to 19. But so that's part of the cost. You have more coming in, you drop the eligibility so that almost everybody who's illegal is eligible for it. And then we discover these people have chronic problems because they haven't been getting good health care.
Now, some people might say, well, Terry, we're all humans on this planet. We all deserve health care as a right. Fine. You want to make that argument, make the argument. But make it in the democratic process of having a hearing, having it covered, let the voters hear about it, let the voters hear about what it's going to cost them, how it's going to drive their property taxes up or their any number of other taxes up, because those costs have to be paid for in some form or fashion. What is it going to do to the doctors, the hospitals, and overcrowding in those facilities? And, then if we say, yeah, we're willing to incur these costs, then we do it. But you don't do it the way the Democrats in the legislature did, which was to slip it in under the rug. And then all of a sudden, here's a $1 billion plus cost that at the same time, these same lawmakers are saying, well, we should be spending more on schools. We should be spending more on this social program. Brendan Johnson wants to be spending money to keep these young kids from going into a way of crime. Okay, but now you're diverting over $1 billion that could have gone to some of these programs.
What we're saying is we don't have a regular order. Why? We have a Democratic Party that's completely in control. The Illinois House, 78 Democrats, 40 Republicans. As you say, and in the Senate, you are down. You almost don't have a caucus. It's 40 to 19, 40 Democrats and 19 Republicans. And so because there's who can speak, and for a long time, Speaker Mike Madigan, which we'll get to shortly, had basically dictatorial control over the House. It's 37, 38 years. We took a coffee break, 2 years off. Other than that, he's been speaker all the time. And when he basically, if you wanted to get a bill to even be heard, you had to get Madigan to approve it. That's no way to run a legislature. That's no right way to run a state. Is it any wonder that we have these problems coming up? When instead of having a democracy, instead of having Democrats with a small d, we have one man in control. And now there's a trial, which we'll get to shortly, involving him, although he's not named as a defendant in that case, although he has been named as a defendant in a case coming up. The point is, this is all related. If you want to untangle, if you want to make Illinois more efficient, more responsive, deal with crime, deal with education, you'd better start untangling these things, because you can't just do it piecemeal, which means, perhaps another topic, the Republican Party needs to take a look at how does it reconstruct itself? Who are the leaders who can lead this state out of uh, both Democrat and Republican leaders who could lead the state in a different direction? You cannot keep doing this, making mistake after mistake, promoting people from state rep to congresswoman
Look, I know
when that
we got other
person
things
did
we want
not
to talk
perform.
about the state, and we're going to, and we'll move to that. But briefly, since we brought up the border, I want to bring up that here we have President Biden this week announced that he was going to be running for another term. And, do people want 4 more years? Number one. Number two, the man, his mental competency is in question. He had a press conference with the president of South Korea earlier this week, and it was shown that here we had the president was holding a cheat sheet about what reporter he should call on and what the question was going to be, so that the president would know how to answer it and basically be able to read from a chart. And the shocking thing is the directions. And it says here, let me bring that back up again. If you start to read what it says under foreign policy, here you are and the directions for the President of the United States from his staff was, you walk to the podium, you talk. I mean, it was as if it was written for someone in kindergarten. And the question of the mental acuity of the president, not so much his age, but when you look at Joe Biden from the past to Joe Biden of today, the man is hollowed out. 30 years ago, I produced the Senate coverage in Washington for C-SPAN, and Joe Biden was one of the interesting people to listen to on the floor because he was very articulate, very forceful in his floor. He's not the same man. So when we're talking about having a campaign 2024, we are looking at a president who would be 82 years old if he's reelected, 86 at the time he would leave the White House. We have a vice president who almost no one puts any ability, confidence in to become president of the United States. So that is going to be an issue, along with things like allowing the border to be open and the cost incurred to the people that we're going to have to weigh in on. Now, that aside, I wanted to get that in before we moved on to some of the other issues that we do want to get to, and the impact on Illinois and the impact of Illinois taxpayers. Let's talk about some of those issues, Jeff. Where do you want to go? Which one do you want to bring up first?
Well, let's look at what's happening. We're still losing population. We're losing taxpayers. And this has been going on for 20 years and it's getting worse. And our governor is in denial. He seizes every opportunity to say, oh, no, this was mistaken. See, we're really growing. Well, Illinois lost the second biggest share of income to domestic outmigration.
And we got a slide on
in
that. Let me
2020.
bring that slide up, and then here you can make your point. Go ahead and address it.
I mean, Illinois lost 2.5% of its income, okay, and out to domestic outmigration in 2020. You can't keep losing that much money because you're losing taxpayers' money and you're losing population.
So the tax
And
base,
that's
the tax base is dwindling.
right. And what we have in that chart is a 50-state survey, and you see Illinois is over on the left. Those are the people who are losing income, and Illinois is the second largest share
Right
of
after New
income
York.
losing, right after New York. Go over to the right, and you see the states that
Oh, who's
are
number one, Jeff?
gaining.
Florida.
That would be Florida. And who is the governor of Florida? Ron
Ron
DeSantis, who
DeSantis.
will be announcing soon that he'll be running against Donald Trump in the Republican primary for president. So now we're going to have some choices because maybe Governor Pritzker wants to run for president, and he can probably say he comes from a state that's losing income. It's going, well, 45 states. If you match up states, we are a net loser of individuals relative to 45 states. We only win relative to 5.
By the
And we
way,
lose big in
I
Florida.
want
Okay?
to just before we recorded this, Mayor Suarez of Miami was being interviewed. Mayor Suarez of Miami is one of the very few Republicans mayors of any major city their crime level is down to 1964 levels, I think actually maybe even below that. And why? He says because he continue to add to police. And the reason I wanted to insert that is because Suarez, in addition to Ron DeSantis, I think is going to be also announcing that he's going to be seeking the Republican nomination for president.
Well, we'll find out about that. Let's go back to the slide again. Third worst in terms of Illinois has lost
Did you
$11
want that
billion.
same slide?
Yeah, right. I mean, up there, it's another slide. But just to remind people, second biggest share of income loss, and Illinois has lost $11 billion in 2020. Third worst. That's how much of the adjusted gross income that's being lost to other states when you have out migration. Let's go to the other slide and take a look at the if we can summarize this. The income who leave Illinois, the incomes are far larger than the incomes of people who move into Illinois. If we look, we started this 20 years ago, and we were losing people who earning 54,000, and we were attracting people who were earning 49,000. A gap, but it was relatively small. Now we go to 2020, and we're losing people who are earning 118,000, and we're gaining people who are earning 74,000. So on average, for every net person going out as opposed to coming in, we're losing, it's a $44,000 gap. So you cannot keep running the government this way, attracting people who are earning less and losing your top earners. People are voting with their feet. They're
Wait, just
11.
sorry. So again, you have this income here as we see. And by the way, I wanted to insert that we have, speaking of Florida, and we know that so many people are going to Florida these days. I just mentioned DeSantis, the mayor Suarez of Miami, and Florida is running a $21 billion budget surplus for the state, where our governor is saying they balanced the budget. Other people are saying that's not true. It's certainly not going to be true if we keep having these trends that you're talking about, and when we're spending over $1 billion to be generous with health care for people who are not citizens of the country, much less the state of Illinois.
And we should note those slides came from WirePoints, as do many of the slides we use on the show. WirePoints is providing the truth. They're providing data. If people want to challenge the slides, if they want to challenge this data, let us know. That's what we should have. I think those numbers are accurate. I think they're providing the truth.
WirePoints
But
does
if
a very
somebody
good
disagrees,
job, and they always, try to. They're not making these numbers up. Let's put it that way. WirePoints is using this data. They get it from various credible sources, such as in most cases government sources. So they're going by the facts of what the government is reporting. They're not sitting here. The fact of the matter is, more of the media ought to be working with this information, ought to be covering the reality. Too many times what we're hearing are political opinions. We hear lawmakers saying we ought to invest in education, we ought to invest in healthcare, blah, blah, blah.
well, Terry, let me.
The
We only have a
numbers
few
just
minutes
don't
left.
often back up their arguments.
Let's one more point on that because we're running out of time. We remember we covered extensively the mayhem in Chicago on April 15th in downtown Chicago at Millennium Park. And how did our mayor-elect respond? He talked about, well, he doesn't want to condone that, but we don't want to demonize. That was his word. We don't want to demonize our kids. And then he talked about kids making silly decisions, okay, and acting silly. But he didn't put it in the right context. Let's put it in the context. Let's take
Well,
a look
let's take
at
a look at what some of our Chicago kids, as the mayor might say, are actually engaged in. Here you go.
dozens of 17 to 19-year-olds. He calls them kids. I call them youth, or I call them young adults.
Some
Are
people would call them thugs.
are arrested for homicide or attempted homicide in Chicago annually. And you can see on the right there, we have 80 homicides by these individuals are arrested for homicide or an attempted homicide, 80 in the year 2022. This is serious stuff. Okay, and where do you end up with? Let's take a look at the next slide. Yeah, so 120 in 2022. They're murdered. So our mayor-elect is talking about demonizing kids. He should be looking at these charts. He should be saying, these kids, if we ignore these problems under the broken windows theory, you got a broken window, you don't clean it up, you don't find out the source of the problem, you're
I just,
minor robbery to major to felonies to murder. We have to get a government that starts acting properly from the top in Illinois, Governor Pritzker, down to the cities across the state, the mayors across the state, and we got to get presidents who know what they're doing, whether they're Republican or Democrat, talk and speak directly to the issues and look at the data, look at the science, and speak thoughtfully and correct these problems. That's it. Correct the problems.
so Jeff,
That's
let's
what we should
let's
be
wrap
doing.
up. What we have Chicago controlled by the Democrats. We have the state controlled by the Democrats. Really, the same people, Chicago Democrats in both cases, and we've got exploding healthcare costs because they're giving money out to people that, under the law of the United States, are not supposed to be getting these benefits. That's why the federal government's not going to compensate the state 50%. You've got crime exploding. You got a new mayor coming in this coming week. This is the last time we'll tape this that Lori Lightfoot will be the mayor. And he's not going to be taking the bull by the horns, as we might say. As I mentioned, Mayor Suarez, what did he do to get crime down to 60-year lows? He added a lot more police. He said he's going to continue to add more police because, as he said, every time he goes into a poor neighborhood, the people there don't say we want fewer police. They say we want more police because that way they can walk the streets without being attacked at night, because he has brought law and order back. And that's what you need. You need to have safety if you're going to have people stay in Illinois, which are fleeing, if you're going to have businesses stay and grow in Illinois, which are leaving, as you and I have discussed in the past.
It's time for change. We thought we were getting change 15 years ago. I think in 2024, people ought to look at that. It's certainly nationally time for change. They should start looking ahead to 2026 when the next governor's race 4 years from now, and then the next mayor's race 4 years from now. You've got to start getting people who are competent, thoughtful, and look at data to deal with these problems. And
We need
come up with solutions.
politicians to address the issues as they are. WirePoints is giving us the actual data. We have to have politicians willing to tackle the issues and to move away from this ideological fantasy that so many times they're doing. Because if you want to do that, if that's how you want to operate the state, you're just going to be driving more and more and more people out, both taxpayers at the home level and our businesses, and ultimately the system will implode on itself. That's the direction we're on.
Let us know what you think. Do you like the program? Give us your comments. We will respond.
And if you don't like the
and come back
program, let
next
us
week.
know that too. Okay? Thanks so
As
much,
well.
everyone.